Deputy Ryan.
Thanks much. Minister, I was walking down Grafton Street the other day and realised another shop had gone. The shop's part of our culture, heritage, our streetscape. Fitzpatrick's shoe shop, where I used to buy my shoes. And I went down to Temple Bar. Eager Beaver, another shop I've been in over the years, brilliant business, is also shutting down. Walton's left last year. And it's not just Dublin. Sam McCauley's chemist in Waterford, my colleague Senator Grace Sullivan, was lamenting its closure recently. Liam Rochelle's bookshop in Cork. Sheehan's grocery in Mallow. A friend of mine in Galway told me they've gone from 15 butchers in Galway down to 3. Limerick Leader running a big story about Cruises Street as an example of how our streets are not working. And I'm asking you as Minister responsible for enterprise, are you monitoring this change in the whole retail sector, and what are you doing? What could we do to support small Irish retailers?
Mind for raising this issue. My department established and convenes, of course, the Retail Consultation Forum to enable key issues affecting the retail sector to be discussed. And that's a really important forum. And the whole idea is to have a view for identifying practical actions which can be taken by the government or by industry itself to support sustainable growth in that sector. As, of course, you said, the retail sector is the largest private sector employer in the country, 90% Irish-owned, and it supports jobs in every city, towns and villages in the country. And we understand very much in the department the importance of the retail sector. The framework for town renewal, centre renewal, was developed in 2017 by the working group of the Retail Consultation Forum, setting out a practical step-by-step action for stakeholders to work collaboratively to enhance their local towns and villages. The framework also encourages towns and villages to establish digital platforms in response to the changing retail environment. As a collaborative level, using the framework, town groups can work together to improve the footfall and the customer experience in town centres through the various measures such as enhancing accessibility, public spaces and tackling vacant property. The framework also serves to support the document for towns and villages applying for stream funding under Project Ireland 2040. We're talking there about the urban regeneration, €2 billion, and the rural regeneration, €1 billion, which can be leveraged to support the regeneration and the viability of town centres. Digitalisation has also increased the scope of competition of the retail sector, as reflected in the growth of online shopping and changing consumer preferences in terms of how people are shopping in town centres. Sustainable physical retail outlets require adaptation. Many retailers now offer multiple sale channels to sell their goods, from physical stores to social media, mobile apps and websites. Last September, we launched a new pilot online retail scheme delivered by Enterprise Ireland with a total fund of €1.25 million. The online retail scheme will support retail businesses of 20 people more who are ready to strategically grow their businesses online. At least 50% of the total number of grants awarded under the scheme will be prioritised for retail SMEs with their headquarters outside of Dublin, subject to the applications meeting the minimum standards. 11 successful applications in Call 1 were announced on the 1st of March 2019 in Skibbereen, and we look forward to announcing a second later on this year. In addition, the local enterprise offices, and the trading online vouchers as well. All these are really important.
It will be in the official report. I'll be depriving members later, so we'll try and stick to the time. Deputy Ryan, 1 minute.
Mr. I have a fear that as all this switch online happens, if we're just watching that happen, we will end up with derelict high streets. And it's what's actually happening. And to varying degrees, different towns are affected in different ways, or else we'll end up with multinational or large retailers. We'll have no small Irish Indigenous retailers. Retail Ireland, I think, are saying that the 4 things that's crippling is labour costs, rates, insurance and rent. We can't control all of those, but you have levers on some of them. Could you look at an idea in terms of rates, that we would look at differentiated rates? That if a business is involved in real craft business, the likes of the bakers, butchers, candlestick makers, or repair people, that they might have a different rates based, or there might be rates based on volume of turnover, not just on the retail asset valuation, because at the moment all those high streets are turning in the likes of Dublin, Grafton Street, it's just mobile phone shops, because they're the only ones who can afford the rates and rent that apply. What specifically do you think we could do to encourage either to support those small retailers, or else to turn the streets around to more mixed streets rather than the retail streets they have historically been?
Breen.
Thank you, Deputy Ryan. The rural and the urban regeneration scheme. I want to take a town in my own county, like Ennis. And Parnell Street was one of those streets that you mentioned in Ennis that ran down and not that many people shopping in it. And Ennis Town Council, or the Clare County Council, should I say, applied for funding on the urban regeneration scheme and got over €1.3 million to regenerate and revigorate Parnell Street in Ennis. I mean, I want to say to you in relation to, and I acknowledge as someone that comes from rural Ireland, Deputy Ryan, our towns and villages, what's happening in them, and how the big multi-stores are, taken over in our larger towns, etc. as well. And of course, as we rightly pointed out, online shopping is something that has increased and consumer habits are changing very much indeed. And that's why it's important for us to encourage existing retailers to go online. I think that's important as well, because governments can put all the supports you like in place to assist retailers and encourage shoppers, but in the end it's the consumer that's making the choice. I think that has to be said as well.
Thank you, Minister.
But it is important for us to ensure that we re-energise rural Ireland, and that's why I've outlined there a number of the schemes the government has put into place, and we will continue to do that through my own department and Minister Rings.
Deputy Ryan, 1 minute.
The application of the urban regeneration and the rural to be spent in the towns, in the centre of our towns. It's critical because our 19th century towns, a lot of them are dying on their feet. And we can't turn back to the 19th century, but we should make sure that we don't just do laissez-faire, everyone's shopping in the multi-storey out-of-town shopping centre and the street dies. We need to get people back living in those streets, because that will help local retailers where someone is going to walk to the local shop. Could you indicate, if you don't have the figures here, maybe you could follow up or ask the department to follow up written reply, how much so far of the funding that's been allocated in the Urban Regeneration Fund or the Rural Regeneration Fund has been allocated for exactly those type of schemes, the one you mentioned on Parnell Street in Ennis? I would allocate the entire funds to that one project alone, because if we don't do it, the centre of our cities and the centre of our towns are going to die. I think we should prioritise it as an investment. So I'd be keen to know how much of all the funding so far has gone to that purpose. It's the best spending because it helps local business and it will get people living back in the centre of our towns and cities. I'm delighted
to acknowledge the importance of the rural and the urban regeneration scheme. They're really important, together with the town and village renewal scheme as well. Can I give you just one more example where, in relation to the urban renewal scheme, taking the second biggest town in County Clare, Shannon. Clare County Council applied hastily, I think a little bit, for the urban regeneration scheme to put a heart into Shannon town. As you know, Shannon is a new town, doesn't have a streetscape like other towns around Ireland. It's just a shopping centre in the centre of it. And this is why I think when you focused in the centre is really important, to have a heart in the centre, to have a life in the centre, so that people can live in the town centre and on the outlying areas as well. And Clare County Council at the time applied for funding. They didn't get the funding required because the project didn't live up to what the urban regeneration scheme should be. It was for a theatre. But we did get €100,000 for the project. And since then, Clare County Council have met the senior planners in the Department of the Environment. They're developing a plan. They're consulting with the locals. And they're developing a plan to focus on the economic prosperity and the assets of the region. They're going to design a project from in-house and out-house consultants. And that project will be put into Category 1 and will be applied for by the end of the year in the urban regeneration scheme. And I hope that they will get
money for that. We have to observe the time, please. There are a lot of deputies awaiting.
Clare, and it's a good county to pick on as an example. There are friends of mine now would be looking the likes of Scariff, the likes of Kilrush, which I could give you as examples, which are dying on their feet. The streets are dying. Scariff was down, I think, to a single retailer now. That's what the risk is happening in every single Irish town, that we'll be left with one multiple outlet. Now, they're good businesses. They're run by local families typically, so I wouldn't doubt them. But you can't have a street or a 19th century street which just has one shop in it. What are we going to do with the rest of the street? And it may mean that we're going back to putting families back into the centre, and maybe that will lead to a second shop opening up because those families will walk to the shop rather than drive. But that's the reality of what happened. You can point out an example of one project in Shannon. I could point you 10 examples of towns in Clare where it's dying on its feet, and it's happening right across the country. And it needs a more proactive engagement with the government, not just with that fund, but with a range of policies around changing the rate structure, helping rents for smaller businesses, Irish local retailers. They need support.
Minister to respond.
Two towns there. Scarf got funding under the Village Renewal Scheme. Recently, Kilrush got funding for €1.7 million for the Vandeleur Gardens project, which is going to build a showcase for craft shops, etc. as well. And I know Clare County Council have plans to regenerate Francis Street in Kilrush. So, the rural enterprise scheme has been also is an important contribution here as well, Deputy Ryan, to re-energise our towns and villages, and that's why Minister Ring has many of these projects put in place under the Urban Regeneration Scheme that has seen millions go into counties, and outline the one in Enniskew. There are other areas as well throughout the country which I am sure got money under that project as well. But I will try and get the figures for you in relation to the urban scheme and the rural renewal scheme, because this is what we've been trying to do: create an environment so that we can sustain our rural towns and our rural villages. They are going to change, there's no doubt about that, because digitalisation is changing the way we do business. But I think the fact that we have a minister in that department that's working to enhance and improve our towns and villages is a sign of our government's commitment to the towns and villages.
Thank you very much, Minister. Now we'll go back to question 4. Deputy Minister.